"Open the vault or your mom loses her job." That was the sentence that froze the room, and yeah, I still hear it in my head sometimes, not because it was clever, but because of how casually it was said. Like firing a woman who scrubbed floors for a living was the same thing as sending back a bad steak. I was standing there 13 years old, too skinny for my jacket palms already sweating, while a man worth more money than I could even picture smiled at me like I was a joke someone else had told. Everyone else laughed. That part mattered. You know what I mean? It wasn't just him. It was the way a whole room full of powerful people leaned back, phones halfway raised, already hungry for the clip they'd send around later. The billionaire swirled his drink and said there was $300 million locked in that vault. Best experts in the country couldn't open it. But sure, let's see what the janitor's kid can do. 10 minutes. If I failed, my mom was done. If I succeeded, well, he hadn't really thought that part through. Before I tell you what happened next, let me rewind a bit because moments like that don't come out of nowhere. 30 minutes earlier, I was sitting in a service hallway behind the ballroom, the kind of place guests never notice. Smelled like bleach and old cologne. I was on an upside-down crate, feet swinging, reading a beat-up book about mechanical systems I'd borrowed from the public library for the third time. I'd learned early that if you stayed quiet and kept your head down, rich people barely saw you. That invisibility was a skill, and my mom taught it to me like it was survival math. My mom, Elena, had worked for Marcus Hale for 11 years. Cleaning offices, cleaning penthouses, cleaning up after people who never learned her name. Her hands were always cracked from chemicals, her back always sore, but she smiled through it because smiling kept food on the table. That night, her babysitter canceled last minute. She didn't want to bring me, but missing work wasn't an option. So I sat in the back, invisible, doing my thing. Through the door, I could see the party. Crystal lights, marble floors, suits that probably cost more than our car. Hale loved showing off. Tonight's centerpiece wasn't a painting or a sculpture, though. It was a massive steel vault, military grade, supposedly recovered from some old European bunker, rumored to hold assets worth hundreds of millions. Haley didn't care what was inside. He cared that nobody else could get in. He'd made a game of it. Try to open it, fail, become a story he'd retell over drinks. The thing is, I recognized that vault the second I saw it. I'd spent months watching videos, reading forums, learning how locking mechanisms actually worked. Not guessing combinations, but listening. Feeling. Certain older vaults had quirks, acoustic, tells vibrations you could sense if you knew what to look for. I wasn't supposed to know that. Kids like me weren't supposed to know anything that made powerful men uncomfortable. My mom came back to check on me, fixed my collar, whispered, "Stay out of sight." "Okay." I nodded. I always did. Then someone stumbled into me. Wine spilled down my shirt, red spreading like a bad metaphor. A voice said, "Why is there a kid back here?" And just like that, invisibility snapped. Marcus Hale turned. Slowly. He took his time walking over like the silence was part of the show. He looked me up and down, then looked at my mom. Smiled. "You bring your mascot to work now?" Laughter rippled. My mom apologized, explained. He cut her off, said he paid her to clean, not to think. Then his eyes landed on the vault and I could almost see the idea spark. That's when he made the bet. Open it and your mom gets a big bonus. Fail, and she's fired on the spot. Phones came up higher. Someone whispered, "This is going to be good." I didn't feel brave in that moment. I felt tired. Tired of watching my mom swallow disrespect. Tired of being invisible unless someone wanted a laugh. So I stepped forward. No speech, no big move, just walked up to the vault and put my hand on the cold steel. The room went quiet. I rested my cheek against the metal, closed my eyes, and started turning the dial slowly. I wasn't guessing. I was listening. The vault had a voice, subtle, almost shy, but it was there. One tumbler clicked into place. Then another. Hale started to say something smug, then stopped mid-sentence. 32 seconds. That's all it took. The door swung open with a heavy final sound that echoed through the room. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then chaos. People rushed forward. Phones flashed. Someone gasped. Inside the vault wasn't art or gold, it was paper. Stacks and stacks of documents, account statements, transfers, names, lots of names, including my mom's. She dropped to her knees when she saw it. Not from weakness, from shock. Her retirement fund. Gone. Hale lunged forward, shouting that nobody had permission to look, that it was private property. But it was too late. 50 cameras had already seen everything. That's when I spoke up. Quietly. Reminded him of the bet. He froze. Then his face changed. The jokes stopped. He started threatening lawyers, immigration, everything he thought would scare us back into silence. He told me to apologize, to say it was all fake. He promised my mom could keep her job if I just played along. She begged me to do it. I could see the fear in her eyes. Years of surviving had trained her to choose safety over justice. I almost did. Almost. Then I looked past her toward the staff standing in the doorway. People who'd been ignored for years. People whose names were probably buried in those documents, too. And I said no. I told him if the papers were fake, he'd want an investigation. That bullies only win when everyone stays quiet. My voice shook, but it carried. One worker stepped forward, then another. They stood behind me, a line of people who were done pretending not to exist. Sirens wailed outside. Someone had called the authorities. A reporter was already uploading footage. Hale's confidence collapsed in real time. He was arrested right there, shouting about who he was as the cuffs went on. Nobody cared. The next day, the story was everywhere. Headlines, hashtags. People called me a hero. I didn't feel like one. I felt like a kid who opened a door that wasn't supposed to be opened. Life after that was strange. My mom quit working for people who treated her like furniture. She helped start a support group for workers like her. I went back to school, tried to be normal. I started a small after-school club for kids who liked puzzles and mechanics. We took apart old clocks, talked about how systems work. No cameras, no fame, just curiosity. A year later, Hale was sentenced to decades in prison. The vault ended up in a museum with a little plaque about unexpected access. My mom bought a small apartment outright. No landlord, no fear. Sometimes people ask me if I'd do it again, if opening that vault was worth the risk. I always think about that night, the laughter, the threat, the silence right before everything changed. I think about how power depends on people believing they're too small to challenge it. So, here's my question for you. If you were in that room, would you have stayed quiet? Would you have told the kid to apologize to play it safe to survive? Or would you have stepped forward and listened for the click that changes everything? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know where you stand, because stories like this don't end when the video does. They keep going every time someone decides whether to speak up or look away.